Many believe that the lack of money results from bad luck, the economy, or circumstances. Few realize that true imprisonment is internal, a silent cycle that repeats life after life, keeping the human mind spinning within the same illusion, that one must struggle to deserve what is already theirs by nature. This is the wheel of samsara of scarcity, the subtle mechanism that transforms the creative spirit into a slave of survival. Itzhak Bentov said that human consciousness is an extension of the universe learning about itself. This means that everything we experience, including financial difficulties, is a direct expression of the mind's vibrational state. When someone believes that money is something separate, distant, or impossible to maintain, they are merely projecting outward what has not yet been healed within. Money is not the problem, it is the mirror. It reveals the level of harmony between your energetic field and the universal flow of abundance. The great controversy is that to escape scarcity, it is not necessary to work harder or study wealth formulas, but rather to expand consciousness. Money follows the movement of energy, and energy follows the movement of the mind. As long as the mind remains trapped in the idea that it's never enough, the universe will continue to respond with situations that confirm this belief. Liberation begins when the individual understands that scarcity is a karmic pattern, a vibrational inheritance that repeats until the lesson is assimilated. There is no punishment, only resonance. The universe does not punish, it merely mirrors. What you see on the outside is a reflection of the frequency you sustain on the inside. This video is an invitation for those who feel they have lived long enough within the wheel of lack. A call for those who want to transcend the survival mentality and access a new level of consciousness, where money ceases to be a burden and becomes simply energy in motion. You will understand how ancestral beliefs, unconscious vows, and energetic blockages shape your relationship with prosperity. And more than that, you will discover how to dissolve all of this, to finally live in alignment with the flow of natural abundance that has always been available. Because true freedom is not in accumulating more, it is in remembering that you were never separated from the source that creates everything. At some point in the journey, every awakened being realizes that the flow of life seems to repeat with almost mathematical precision. It is as if an invisible symphony always plays the same notes, with scarcity as the central theme. Opportunities arrive but evaporate. Money comes in but slips through the fingers. The rational mind tries to explain, blaming chance, the system, fate, but something deeper is happening. The universe does not repeat experiences out of cruelty, it repeats them to teach. The karmic pattern reveals itself precisely in this cycle that returns with insistence. It manifests not only in finances but in everything that represents value and security. When the individual feels it is never enough, that they are always chasing and never catching up, what is truly moving is an ancient vibration, the memory of lack. This vibration is an energetic code, a frequency that the field of consciousness emits without realizing it. And everything that vibrates with lack attracts lack, not as punishment but through resonance. Human consciousness is like a quantum mirror. It reflects into external reality the hidden content of internal belief. When the mind repeats, "Money is not for me," the energetic field aligns with this idea and constructs circumstances that confirm it. Thus, scarcity is not a material problem, it is spiritual language. The universe is trying to communicate something the soul has not yet understood, that true imprisonment is not in the absence of resources, but in the belief that they are unattainable. Recognizing this cycle is the turning point. It is not about guilt or regret, but about lucidity. When the seeker observes themselves with serenity, they begin to perceive that there is an invisible thread connecting each financial situation, each loss, each feeling of powerlessness. This thread is the personal samsara of scarcity, the wheel that spins because there is still something to be learned about worthiness, trust, and flow. The perception of this pattern is not a burden, it is a gift. It is the call of consciousness asking to awaken from a collective dream of limitation. In this moment of recognition, something silent begins to change. The mind becomes a witness to its own game, and the energetic field reorganizes itself. It is as if a forgotten part of the soul begins to whisper, "You are not the pattern, you are the observer of the pattern." And upon hearing this whisper, the seeker feels that perhaps scarcity is not a sentence, but a mirror pointing to more subtle layers of their being. It is at this point, when clarity settles in and the veil of repetition begins to dissolve, that the investigation deepens. Because the question that naturally arises is, where does this ancient vibration that sustains the cycle of lack come from? What memories are etched in the energetic field, sustaining this experience? When the seeker begins to perceive that the cycle of scarcity is not born from circumstances but from the very vibration that sustains them, they approach an ancient truth. The root of lack is inscribed in energy. Consciousness carries memories that do not belong only to this life. They are fragments of ancestral experiences, vibrational inheritances from entire lineages that faced deprivation, fears, and survival. These memories do not fade with linear time, for time, on the energetic plane, is merely a fold of perception. Within each human being, there is a vibrational field that contains the echo of these stories. In many, the root chakra, the center that anchors the energy of security and survival, pulses out of rhythm, congested by ancient traumas. Wars, famines, material losses, rejections, all of this engraves impressions that cross generations. When these records are not released, they become active programs in the energetic structure. The physical body feels it, the emotional body reacts, and the mind constructs rational justifications for an essentially spiritual phenomenon. The solar plexus chakra also carries important mark. It is the center of personal power, self-confidence, and expression in the world. When the individual, in some lifetime or ancestral context, was punished for prospering, exploited for trusting, or oppressed for having their own shine, the solar plexus contracts. This contraction prevents the flow of prana, the life force, from circulating freely. And without flow there is no expansion. Energy stagnates, and abundance, which is pure movement, finds no passage. There is also an even more subtle layer: vows of poverty. In past eras, many souls chose spiritual paths that associated material detachment with inner purity. They were monks, priestesses, ascetics, devotees who renounced everything in search of enlightenment. These vows, even made with elevated intention, can remain active as energetic codes, creating an unconscious repulsion toward money and prosperity. It is common for the contemporary seeker to feel guilt when desiring abundance, as if prospering were a betrayal of the soul. But consciousness is evolving, and the current awakening invites us to understand that true detachment is not rejecting the material, but rather not being dominated by it. When the seeker perceives that energy and matter are expressions of the same divine essence, money ceases to be a spiritual taboo and becomes recognized as part of the flow of life. This understanding dissolves ancient blockages in the lower chakras and begins to restore the balance between heaven and earth within the being. Energy then begins to move differently. The body vibrates at another frequency. The auric field expands. And with this expansion, a new perception arises. Perhaps what we call scarcity is nothing more than an illusion sustained by the belief that we are separated from the infinite source. And it is precisely at this frontier between belief and reality that the next step of the journey reveals itself: the encounter with the financial ego and the illusion of separation. Much of human suffering is born from the belief that there is a self separate from the whole. This illusion is the matrix of all imbalances, including the financial one. Money, like any form of energy, responds to the consciousness that observes it. When the mind sees itself as isolated, disconnected from the creative source, it begins to act in survival mode. And in this state, everything perceived as scarce becomes a threat. The financial ego emerges as the psychological face of this deception. It feeds on the idea that personal value depends on the quantity accumulated, not on the quality of the vibration emitted. It is the one who whispers that abundance is outside, that one must fight for it, compete, prove worthiness. However, this is the most efficient gear of the samsara of lack, a mechanism that keeps the human being spinning in circles within a belief system they themselves constructed. Itzhak Bentov used to explain that consciousness is a self-organizing field, capable of shaping reality according to its own vibrational structure. If the mind vibrates separation, the universe reorganizes itself to mirror this perception. This is why so many strive intensely and still continue to feel that it's not enough. External effort does not compensate for internal misalignment. The more one believes in the distance between the self and abundance, the more this distance manifests. The illusion of separation also creates a fragile identity. The individual begins to define themselves by the fluctuations of the material world, feeling prosperous when there is stability and lost when money decreases. This constant oscillation keeps them emotionally trapped on the roller coaster of the ego. And the ego, as Bentov taught, is a useful structure only as long as it does not become the master. When it governs, consciousness loses contact with unity, and financial energy becomes fragmented. But when the being begins to remember, even subtly, that they are part of the infinite field that sustains all forms, control dissolves and natural flow is re-established. Money returns to fulfilling its original role, serving as a bridge between planes, the material expression of a neutral energy that responds to the state of inner harmony. Abundance is not something to be conquered, it is something that reveals itself when the idea of separation loses meaning. And it is precisely at this point that financial karma begins to show its true purpose. Because what seemed like punishment may simply be the universe's wisest way of teaching balance through experience. The universe is moved by a principle of balance. Each action, thought, or intention generates a movement that seeks to return to the point of harmony. What we call karma is not a punitive force, but a natural law of energetic readjustment. Just as the body restores balance after a wound, the soul also tries to correct the imbalances it creates throughout its experiences. When this principle manifests in the financial field, what we can call the karma of prosperity is born, a direct reflection of how the individual has dealt, throughout their incarnations, with material power and inner value. Itzhak Bentov affirmed that the human being is a living antenna, constantly emitting and receiving frequencies that translate into events in the physical world. This means that energy is not lost, it transforms and returns. If at some point in the journey the individual used material resources without consciousness, or built wealth based on imbalance, this energy will continue circulating until it finds a point of correction. In the same way, those who lived experiences of deprivation, fear of loss, or excessive attachment to money carry vibrational impressions that shape the current financial flow. Financial karma is the mirror of these past experiences, showing where there is still resistance, guilt, or fear. Often, the seeker feels there is an invisible force blocking their progress, as if there were an energetic barrier between them and prosperity. In reality, what exists is an active memory in the field of consciousness. Each time the individual feels they do not deserve to receive, that they are afraid of having too much, or that they associate money with something impure, they are reactivating an ancient record. The universe responds with surgical precision, returning circumstances that force them to face these beliefs head-on. The interesting thing is that these experiences need not be seen as punishment. They are invitations to transcendence. When the soul understands that it is repeating a lesson, the pattern begins to dissolve. Awakened consciousness perceives that karma is not linear, it is holographic. Each situation of scarcity carries within it the code of liberation. The question is not how much one possesses, but how much one understands the purpose of what one lives. When the mind shifts position and begins to see financial difficulty as a pedagogical mirror, something realigns in the vibrational field. At this point, learning about value becomes essential. Money, in its energetic nature, represents the circulation of worthiness. If there is guilt about prospering, the flow is interrupted. If there is arrogance in abundance, the flow is distorted. If there is fear of loss, the flow retracts. Karmic balance is restored when the being understands that everything that exists is exchange, a constant dance between giving and receiving. And giving is not only offering to others, it is allowing the universe to flow through oneself without resistance. Itzhak Bentov used to say that the expansion of consciousness is a movement of symmetry, where each aspect of the being seeks to reflect the balance of the whole. This means that prosperity is not a privilege. It is a natural consequence of a coherent energetic field. When the being recognizes money as a form of energy in service of evolution, they break the cycle of guilt and debt. In that instant, the ancient wheel of karma ceases to be a mechanism of repetition and becomes an instrument of refinement. Consciousness then begins to vibrate at a new tone. The weight of past experiences transforms into present wisdom. The one who previously felt trapped by destiny now perceives that destiny has always been a reflection of their vibrational choices. And by understanding that every energetic debt is merely a request for unmet learning, the soul frees itself from the burden of scarcity. Because when the learning is assimilated, karma fulfills its function and dissolves into the love that originated it. And it is precisely in this state of understanding that the next step becomes possible, no longer that of paying what was owed, but of transmuting energy into a new consciousness, the alchemy of abundance. True transformation does not occur on the surface of events, but in the invisible structure of consciousness. While the mind seeks external answers, the soul works silently to reorganize the vibrational field. Abundance is not a destination, but a state of coherence between what one feels, what one believes, and what one emits. The alchemy of consciousness begins the instant the being understands that scarcity was never a material condition, but rather a frequency. Itzhak Bentov said that the human body is an instrument for measuring the universe, a kind of seismograph of consciousness. Each emotion, thought, and intention reverberates as a wave that propagates in the quantum field. Thus, when the individual attunes to feelings of gratitude and trust, the body vibrates in harmony with the matrix of abundance. This vibration creates a magnetic field capable of reorganizing circumstances, attracting people, opportunities, and resources that resonate with the new inner state. But this alchemy requires energetic sincerity. It is not enough to repeat affirmations or positive phrases while the nervous system is still trapped in the fear of lack. The universe does not respond to discourse, it responds to vibration. This is why so many try to manifest prosperity and become frustrated. Their words point to the future, but their bodies are anchored in the past. True transmutation happens when the being can feel, in every cell, that they are already part of universal abundance. The mind may doubt, but the body knows. The alchemical process also involves releasing unconscious vows and memories of spiritual poverty. By recognizing that money does not corrupt, but merely amplifies the energy that uses it, the soul begins to reconcile with the flow of matter. When the seeker understands that prospering is also an act of service, because the more abundance they manifest, the more they can share, the vibration expands in all directions. Wealth then ceases to be an end and becomes a natural reflection of inner harmony. Abundance consciousness is a state of presence. It does not live in the expectation of tomorrow, nor in the regret of yesterday. It inhabits the now, where energy is available in its pure form. When the individual anchors themselves in the present with genuine gratitude, time ceases to be an obstacle. What once seemed distant begins to approach. Synchronicity becomes a language of the universe, and each coincidence is a silent response confirming that the frequency has changed. It is at this point that alchemy reveals itself in its essence, transforming fear into trust, doubt into certainty, scarcity into expansion. Consciousness begins to operate no longer as a victim of circumstances, but as a co-author of reality. The energy of abundance ceases to be a search and becomes a natural state of being. Money becomes a tool of expression, not a measure of value. Life, in turn, responds with generosity to the vibration of the one who opens to the flow. Itzhak Bentov observed that when the human being rises in consciousness, their energy becomes coherent with the order of the universe, and the universe responds with synchronicity. This harmony is the foundation of true spiritual alchemy. It is not an external conquest, but a fusion between the divine and the human within the same vibrational field. And when this fusion stabilizes, the being begins to perceive that abundance and scarcity are merely poles of the same energy. A new horizon of understanding then emerges, one in which duality dissolves, and the spirit finally moves beyond the wheel that held it prisoner to lack. When consciousness awakens to the energetic nature of abundance, a silent, almost imperceptible point of inflection arises. It is the instant when the being ceases to seek prosperity and begins to live in harmony with it. In this state, there is no longer the game of opposites, neither victory nor loss, neither excess nor lack, only the flow. The human mind, accustomed to the binary logic of scarcity, resists this vision. It has been trained to measure, compare, and classify. But the essence of abundance cannot be measured, because it is born from unity, not from the sum of parts. Itzhak Bentov used to affirm that consciousness evolves in spirals, and that each turn of the spiral represents an expansion that includes, but transcends, the previous level. Transcending the duality between abundance and scarcity is exactly that. It is not about denying the material world, but about seeing it with new eyes. Money continues to exist, bills continue to arrive, commitments remain, but the relationship with all of this changes radically. The individual no longer perceives themselves as a victim of circumstances, but as a co-creator of the field that surrounds them. From this point on, control loses meaning. The being no longer needs to force the flow because they understand that it is already happening. Action ceases to be moved by anxiety and begins to be born from clarity. In Taoism, this state is called Wu Wei, action without effort, the movement that is born from the natural harmony between will and existence. It is when the human and the divine work together, without friction. Money becomes just one of the many rivers that flow from the same ocean of consciousness. At this stage, the seeker learns paradoxical detachment. They care deeply about their prosperity, but no longer depend on it to feel whole. This is true freedom. When personal value is no longer conditioned on the bank balance, the energetic field stabilizes, and money returns to moving in harmony with the soul's purpose. Abundance manifests organically, not because it was sought, but because it became inevitable. Bentov described this state as a coherence between the microcosm and the macrocosm. When mind, body, and spirit vibrate in harmony, the universe responds with synchrony. Opportunities arrive effortlessly, connections happen naturally, and time seems to bend to favor the being's purpose. This synchronicity is not a miracle. It is the physics of consciousness. The vibration of unity dissolves the noise that previously impeded the flow, and reality begins to reflect the inner field with precision. At this point, money loses its central role and becomes just one of the manifestations of vital flow. Prosperity is no longer a trophy, it is a consequence of internal coherence. The soul, free from the illusion of separation, finally remembers that abundance is its original language. Everything that once seemed like a struggle becomes a dance with the universe itself, a dance of surrender, trust, and wisdom. And when the being reaches this state of vibrational quietude, they perceive that there was never a wheel spinning, only the illusion of being trapped in it. Financial samsara dissolves because consciousness places itself outside the field of polarities. The observer is no longer at the center of the whirlpool, but in the silent space that contains it. From there, they can create with lightness, manifest with precision, and serve the world with generosity. This is true liberation, not that of one who flees the system, but of one who understands the system and chooses to no longer be controlled by it. Abundance then ceases to be an objective, and becomes the natural way of existing. The awakened seeker no longer chases money. They walk with money in balance, consciousness, and purpose. Abundance does not begin when the balance changes, but when consciousness changes. When you decide to reconnect with the universal flow, the material world responds. Everything that seemed distant begins to flow naturally, opportunities, people, ideas, because you have become compatible with the field of prosperity. Now is the moment to apply what you have learned. Observe your thoughts, your words, and your emotions. See where scarcity still vibrates and choose differently. Each time you act with confidence, gratitude, and worthiness, you rewrite your own destiny. And if this content brought clarity to you, if at some point it touched your soul and made you see beyond appearances, then subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and continue walking with me on this journey of consciousness. In the upcoming videos, we will deepen this wisdom, exploring other levels of being and new forms of spiritual liberation. Remember, you are not here to fight against the world, you are here to awaken within it.